one thing about Kent State, not to totally shift gears here, Mark, but the one thing about Kent State is they're not going to come into this game on Saturday intimidated by Kinnick Stadium. I mean, they already played Texas A&M, and I don't have their schedule in front of me, but they've got some tough games. I believe they play Maryland. Do you know that, Mark?
I don't know off the
I'd have to
top of
look
my
that up,
head.
but I think Kent State does get Maryland after Iowa. Anyways, the point is they're ready for this game, and Iowa has struggled at certain years. I mean, Central Michigan, there was the Western Michigan year. I believe it was Ball State. I was at that game, and Iowa found a way to win. But they've started. You never know. And even in years where Iowa's had a great defense and played really well, I think back to 2009. I mean, nearly losing to UNI, had to block 2 field goals to win that game. And that might have been the same year as the Arkansas State game where Iowa nearly lost. So you hope the players are zeroed in. I would think they are. But boy, coming off a high like they are, beating Iowa State on the road, and then of course you got Maryland in 2 weeks. I look back, and Kent State they were in that game against Texas A&M through one half. It was 10-3 at halftime, I believe. So, boy, if you lose to Kent State, we might not be doing a live next week, Mark. But yeah, these are opportunities for Iowa to fine tune things before that Maryland game.
Yeah, good call on Kent State's schedule. They go to College Park the week after, September 25th at Maryland.
Yeah, so I mean, they've got it, and they've already got the A&M game under their belts. I really don't know much about Kent State. I watched most of that game, just watched it back the other day. Texas A&M and Kent State. And Kent State, one thing about Kent State, they do lead the country in interceptions, which is ironic because Iowa's number 2 with 6 interceptions. Kent State's number 1 with 8. So, I kind of, as I watch them, it kind of looked like an all or nothing defense. They're either going to pick you off or they're going to give up scores. I mean, they gave up 31 points in the second half to Texas A&M. Again, Petrus has played clean. I don't anticipate that being a problem. But it is noteworthy. I mean, I know they played VMI, but half of those interceptions were against Texas A&M. So there's that.
Well, we'll serve up this question, Corey. We've got Casey Mallory on the line. Does Kay Johnson get playing time? Kirk Ferentz says he's tearing it up in practice.
Well, I'm assuming he's talking about Keegan Johnson. He's got to be talking about Keegan. He's playing. He is getting snaps. If you look out there, he is playing. I don't know if he's going to get more playing time. I don't know how many snaps he's gotten these first 2 weeks. Arlen Bruce has also gotten some snaps. I haven't heard Kirk Ferentz. I don't know exactly what press conference Casey was talking about, but I haven't heard him make comments about that lately. You always hear in the fall, the media is just going to, and I don't consider myself part of the Iowa media, but they're just going to jump on any rumors or any young guys. The unknowns are always the biggest storylines in fall camp. So, we heard a lot about Arlen Bruce and Keegan Johnson. But the reality is we haven't seen the ball, I don't think, thrown to either one of them yet this season. Certainly, he's right. Casey's right on in thinking that maybe they get more playing time these next 2 weeks. I mean, if you're going to do it now. But I'm just more concerned with getting the ball to Tyrone Tracy. I mean, he is your best wide receiver right now. But the fact that he hasn't gotten the ball is as much as he should be is concerning. And the other thing you got to remember is Keegan Johnson's playing behind a pretty loaded group of receivers. I mean, with Tyrone Tracy, Charlie Jones, obviously Charlie looks great, not only with punt returns, but with kickoff returns right now. So he's clearly in your top 3. And of course, Nico Regani's in your top 3. So you got 3 guys in front of at least in front of Keegan right now. And again, Arlen Bruce is in competition for playing time. One guy that I had predicted, and I'll own this, back in spring that I thought would make a big jump this year was Max Cooper. He's been MIA, and I don't know if Max, he's dealt with a lot of injuries his career. I do know he's, I believe, second on the depth chart behind Charlie for punt returns. Haven't really heard much about him either. The good news is, though, you're going to have plenty of depth at that position. So if Nico goes down, if Tracy goes down, I think Kirk, from what we've heard, he would be comfortable going to Keegan or Arlen or probably even Max to fill the gap there. But I would love to see it too, Casey. But I think the big thing, at least for Kent State, is we got to see Spencer Petras connect with his receivers more. Whether that be, I think it does. They don't have to be bombs, but just getting the ball to Tyrone Tracy more, getting the ball to Nico Reganey more, I'll feel a lot better. And then you get another game to fine tune that against Colorado State. But either way, I mean, hopefully, if Iowa can develop a big lead in either one of these next two games, you get to not only see the backup receivers, but hopefully you get to see a backup quarterback and see what Alex Padilla or Deuce Hogan can do.
So we have some playoff conjecture. We also have here a reminder that you can get to scout to both Maryland and Illinois on the Big Ten Network Friday night. So a rare Friday night game in the Big Ten should be intriguing there. Somebody had commented that Penn State would be the better offense that would be coming to Iowa City this season.
Well, I don't know that I would agree with that. What is Penn State? I mean, who did Penn State play this week, Mark?
They played Ball State. They won 43-13, something like that.
But Penn State was not impressive offensively against Wisconsin.
No.
So I don't buy into that necessarily. I mean, maybe they will be better. I'm not a huge Sean Clifford fan. I don't know if you are, Mark. Obviously, he's in the Eastern Division. But no, I think Maryland right now, at least at quarterback and skill position talent that I'm aware of, would have the edge. I think Penn State's probably better in the trenches, and they probably have a better defense. I see this question from Casey about game day coming to Kinnick versus Penn State. My understanding, I guess it's possible, and again, Mark, you're a former ESPN guy. Maybe you can comment on this, but my understanding is Fox has rights to this game. I don't know how that works, but from what I've heard, that's probably going to be a big noon game, the Iowa-Penn State game, and that game day doesn't normally do the big noon game, do they?
If it's overwhelming, that they have broken trend in recent years, but it has to be decidedly the best matchup of the week for them to make that kind of move. Yeah,
but it'll be a great game. I hope it's not a big noon game because I prefer night games, and Iowa Penn State at night has kind of been a tradition.
Mm-hmm.
But the Big Ten slate that week, I'd have to look at the whatever that is, like week 6. I'd have to look at the schedule, but it's not loaded, I don't believe. So there's a good chance Fox will bite and have Iowa Penn State as the noon game. But both of those two games are going to be great. And I don't want to say you're playing with house money, but you can play. Certainly don't want them to lose to Maryland. I don't want to lose to either team. But if you're playing those two teams, Maryland and Penn State, who I think are two of the better teams in the East, you can kind of play with house money because it's not a double whammy losing to an Eastern opponent. Wisconsin's already got a loss to Penn State in the bag. Northwestern's got a loss to Michigan State. So we're saving. The more important games are later on in the year.
So maybe at some point, Corey, we're going to get you out of that Iowa mindset in terms of strategizing losses. Like we may lose that one. I'd rather lose that one. That puts us in a tie-breaking position. We'll get you in that Ohio State mentality of you don't think you're ever going to lose. Why would we strategize losses or think about losing a game?
Well, I've never heard anybody say that we're going to end up with the Ohio State mentality. What's really makes me nervous. Couple things. I'll be negative Nancy here for a second. Here's what makes me nervous this week after the Penn State game, and you can call me again a Debbie Downer or whatever, negative Nancy. But couple things. You got people like Mark Rogers putting Iowa as the number 1 team in the country. Now, I get the criteria. I agree with you. They've got as a resume right now, they should be number 1. I hate hearing that, and I hate the AP poll ranking Iowa number 5. I'd be just fine with Iowa being unranked. Now, of course, they don't. I just don't like rankings at this point in the season. So, and do I think Iowa players are reading into it? Probably not. I don't like that. That's the first thing. Second thing is, you look at a team like Iowa. I hear people this week talking about, can Iowa, maybe this is Iowa's year to, maybe this is the year where Ohio State isn't going to win the Big Ten, and look at Iowa. Okay, here's the problem with that. First of all, Ohio State's still Ohio State. We're through 2 weeks of the season, and as much as I just got done kind of downplaying some of the concerns about the offense, they're not beating Ohio State with the worst offense in the Power 5. That's just not happening. There is no way that happens. And if Hawkeye Howard, one of our loyal listeners who predicted 12-0, wants to come on here and call me a liar, I want them to, but it's not realistic to think they're going to be able to do that. Now, I do agree that part of the reason, and I think you had Steve Dace on yesterday, Mark, and he commented on this as well. Part of the reason why they're that far down as far as total offensive numbers is because of the competition, but it's not all because of the competition. They've got to figure this out. Again, I think they will, but I don't like people talking about that at this point in the season. Haven't won the West since 2015. Let's just get there first. Let's not worry about, making the playoff and beating Ohio State. And we got to just take care of business in front of us. And maybe I sound like a coach, but let's just go beat Kent State and take one game at a time.
Hey, it's seen year to year. Pick your team that finishes with a glossy record, 10-2, 11-1. Yes, most of those losses are to the team that you would peg in the preseason, but there's a pretty large portion, whether it's 25, 30, 35%, something in that range of those games, those losses come to, and I'll use Ohio State as an example, Iowa 2017, not the team that you would have pegged Ohio State losing to, a good Iowa team, but an 8-5 Iowa team, I believe 8-5 that season with a bowl win against, was that
Boston
the Boston College Pinstripe Bowl?
The ice rink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ohio State lost the next year to a Purdue team that lost 7 games that they were clearly better than, but that was their one loss of the season. Oklahoma, the previous 2 years to last season and going back the last 2 years, losing its only game to Kansas State teams that were 8-5 and 4-6 as a one-loss team. So it's not always the games that you would think. And so there's a lot of different teams that could jump up and challenge Iowa.
Yeah, I see the real Hayden. I see a comment looking at the chat over here too. I've seen us trip up to Purdue and Northwestern too many times. And maybe that's a faulty way of predicting, as far as I know you don't really do game by game predictions, Mark, but maybe that's a faulty way of me doing game by game predictions for Iowa, because, I can see Iowa beating Penn State and Wisconsin, but absolutely I can see Iowa losing to a Northwestern. Again, Northwestern, again, as soon as I discredit them or count them out, they end up finding a way to beat Iowa. Purdue scares me still, because I think they're a little bit better than most people thought. I don't know how good, because again, they've only played Oregon State really. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to speculate on too much at this point, because there's so much season ahead of us. Iowa fans, though, it's okay to be excited, because it's not every day that A, you beat 2 ranked teams back to back, but B, you beat a top 10 team on the road, and you have these 2 ranked games weeks 1 and 2. I mean, it just never happens. Iowa rarely opens up with a Power 5 opponent, period. And the last time they did was last season, and they started 0-2. So it's okay to get excited. Maybe I don't want to be the guy that just keeps pumping the brakes, but yeah, there's just a lot of season ahead of Iowa. They've got the pieces on defense. We'll see if they can put it together on the other side.
And therefore, it is reasonable to make projections that teams will lose to lesser teams, because I typically get the backlash of those kind of comments that if I'm selecting a team to lose to another team, that I automatically think that the team that's going to win the game is the better team. Well, most of the time, yes, but the team that wins isn't necessarily always the better team.